Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 10th presentation of Avalanche Canada's 2021 and 22 webinar series. So happy you folks could make it tonight and take the time out in your evening to attend these webinars. My name is Brent Strand. I'm going to be the producer for the evening. We've got Nancy Geismar, who's also online, and she's going to be the moderator looking for your questions in the Q&A box. We hope you're having a good season out there recreating in the backcountry. It's been a fantastic start earlier in the winter, lots of powder, lots of fun times. You know, the weather has been changing. We've got a couple persistent layers out there. The snowpack's getting different. And now it looks like it feels a bit like spring. Hopefully the winter will come back for us again. First off, I'd like to acknowledge that our session is being hosted in the territory of the Four Nations, the Shinniks, the Secwepemc, the Ktunaxa, and the Silks. As a national organization, we also acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit lands who we live and recreate on. First off, being a nonprofit organization, we really like to thank our sponsors. We're very thankful for them, for the loyal financial support for us during these challenging economic times, and working with us to reach new backcountry users this winter. We have program partners that help support our AST programs. And we also have premier sponsors, supporting sponsors, and contributors that help us as well. We've got an important note tonight. The webinar tonight is hosted and presented by Backcountry Access. They've been a supportive sponsor of Avalanche Canada over many years. They've contributed to our youth AST programs with our toolbox kits, our BIPOC AST program, by providing transceivers, shovels, probes for all the students to use while they're on those courses. Tonight, folks, I hope you all stick around for the night. We're going to have some draw prizes later on in the evening. So those folks will stick around to the end and might get some swag out there. So we hope you folks will stay for that. I also want to say, your support is super welcome. Everything and anything helps. $10. Nancy's going to drop a link in the chat box there. You can help donate to Avalanche Canada. A couple housekeeping notes. You're automatically muted when you come on the session tonight. You don't have access to your video cam. If you want to ask a verbal question, just raise your hand at the bottom of your screen there. I'll unmute you. You can ask the question of our presenter tonight, and then I'll just mute you back up. Otherwise, if you want to just type in the Q&A box, that's the best spot for questions. It's easier for us to track them in there. And then also watch the chat box. We're going to fill that with web links and resource links as we're going through our presentation tonight. So tonight's session is Vancouver Island's condition update. As you probably all know, we have a new Avalanche Canada field team on Vancouver Island. We're pretty stoked about this. And with that being said, that means we're going to have forecasts from coast to coast, including Newfoundland this year. So tonight you're going to hear from Colin Garrity. He's one of our forecasters, and he's the lead field tech out on the island. And he's going to give a bunch of information on the Mountain Information Network. As well, he's going to try and give us a snapshot and some information on how the island snowpack is shaping up and maybe some local events that are going to be happening. Colin is in his 6th year with Avalanche Canada and is especially excited to be leading up Avalanche Canada's inaugural season on the island after 5 years of forecasting and doing field work from our home office in Revelstoke. We kind of miss his smiley face over here, but without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Colin.
Hey, Brent, thanks for that awesome intro. I'm happy to be smiling here on a remote session rather than in Revelstoke. It's great to see you and great to have you on too, Nancy. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm just going to set up a screen share here. It'll take just a quick sec. And I'll do that. And I'll do this. And you should have my presentation lined up there. Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Brent. Cool. So we can get into it. Like Brent said, we'll kind of break things up into 3 parts tonight. And the first part's going to take the lead billing. This is all about the Mountain Information Network. So the goal of this kind of segment here is to help you transition from being a consumer of Avalanche products to helping you actively contribute to building a stronger, more informed Avalanche community. And one of the ideas here is we want you to stop stocking Avalanche products and doing more talking into our Avalanche products. So the min is, it's a type of social media. So we have to kind of recognize that. And it seems like there's some good reasons to think of it that way and to avoid some of the pitfalls we see in other social media. So like instead of lurking, we can be working together. And instead of creeping, we can be speaking to each other and kind of having a conversation about conditions out there. Anyway, the vehicle or the platform for this communication that Avalanche Canada set up is none other than the Mountain Information Network. Before I get into the details, though, I want to get Brent to bring up a few polls. Brent, can we start with our first poll? I think it's about how you get around in the backcountry. What's your backcountry weapon of choice? How do you travel? I'll give a few seconds for people to get into that one. And I don't think I'm privy to the results until it's over, so that's okay. And how do we do? Okay, lots of skiers and boarders, great. Yeah, it's probably some folks that we're gonna see at Mount Cane in the next weekend. Awesome to see a couple snowmobilers in there too, or 4% too, snowmobilers, snow bikers, and snowshoers, hikers as well. Awesome. Yeah, we've got some really awesome hiking groups, kind of clubs here on the island. So I'm really stoked to be connecting with that group too. And occasionally the ice climbing can go off here, and we seem to be doing okay earlier in the season. I know some people have been getting out there on the ice, so it might not be a while before we can do it again. Well, we'll see what the conditions have in store. Yeah, and so another question I'm curious about is your level of avalanche education. Where are you at with training? Have you done like a little bit, like an avalanche awareness days, or like a workshop, like a tutorial on the Avalanche Canada website, something like that? And then if you've gone and actually done a course like an AST or an AST2, or at the pro level, the CAA courses, like the Ops 1 or the Ops 2. What do we get? Oh, cool. Lots of AST1s. Awesome. Some seminar workshop reading type folks. That's great. And some never evers. That's cool too. This is a good start. And some AST2s and even a pro or 2 or 5. Awesome. Cool. Well, welcome everybody. We've got a nice diverse crowd. Okay. Now, before, I think I might forget to ask this question later, so I'm going to ask it now. And it's about your interaction with the Min. If you've used the Min before, or if you've checked out the Min, or if you've posted to the Min, we've got some kind of different levels of how you might have interacted with it in the past. Everything from never heard of it, which is totally cool, to using it every time you go out. That's like me. It's also my job, so. Okay. How do we do? Okay, yeah. Some lurkers, some creepers, some yeah, we can work on that. This is the perfect place to be if that's your scene. And honestly, I think I could probably count the Vancouver Island Min posters. Maybe it would take 2 hands, but I think they're on 1 hand. And there's some real MVPs out there. So really appreciate those guys' those folks' contribution to the Min, and hopefully we can crank up those ratios after tonight. So really helps to know who we're connecting with tonight, and looking forward to actually doing that a poll like that face-to-face with hands raised and stuff like that sometime in the future here, back when we get back to some face-to-face outreach. Oh, I just gotta do this. Okay, great. So to get the idea of a mountain information network, it probably helps to understand the problem actually that AvCan was trying to solve by developing the product. So I'll just kind of take a bit of a side journey here into the idea of our field teams. So Avalanche Canada has several field teams working throughout Western Canada. It all started with the team in the South Rockies, kind of was our flagship kind of field team for quite a few years. There was a big accident that took place in the South Rockies quite a few years ago that spurred a large kind of community kind of donation rallying around the idea of making the forecast happen and making a field team happen. And then we've kind of ported that model to other regions in BC and in the kind of mountainous Western Canada. The North Rockies team is new as of a couple of years ago. And then we've got a Yukon team now. And of course, this year, our inaugural season as the Vancouver Island field team. So the role of these field teams is essentially to travel around on sleds and skis, however kind of gets us around the most efficiently in the backcountry into avalanche terrain or around avalanche terrain. So we can gather avalanche information, weather information, snowpack and conditions info to help make the forecasters create a really accurate avalanche bulletin or avalanche forecast. So we work generally 4 days a week in the field, and we travel around, gathering this info. And it's kind of key to understand that they're huge regions. So even before the island was added to that tally, 12,000 square kilometers of terrain. So huge areas that we're tasked with covering. It's definitely a big challenge, and we're definitely up for it. And we also share information directly through social media and the Mountain Information Network. So not only are we feeding to the forecasters, but we're feeding this info to the public directly as well. So why don't we have a field team in every region? We've got all these forecast regions. They could all use observers out there gathering information for the forecasters. Why don't we just do it everywhere? The reality is that that's a huge project to do that. For one thing, it's very expensive to run that many field teams, and we don't actually need them in every region. So forecasts are created in the Revelstoke head office, but they draw on professional observations from private industry information exchange. So the InfoX is kind of a platform, information sharing platform in the professional community that forecasters use to get the info they need to produce a forecast. And we draw on weather stations as well in different parts of kind of where we forecast. And in many regions, this is enough. We get the info that we need from the InfoX and from weather stations. These are data-rich regions. We can get lots of info from them, and it's reliable. We've got professional data that's happening on kind of a daily basis, because every time that heli skier operator goes out, every time that highway operation or that parks operation heads out of the field, their job is to collect information not only for their internal use, but to share with the community. And a big part of that sharing is a big beneficiary of that sharing is Avalanche Canada, and by extension, the public, because we use that to create the forecasts for folks. Yeah, so it just so happens that Vancouver Island is one of those data sparse regions. So here's an example. The North Rockies, super vast. There are not commercial and highway operations distributed evenly throughout. And Vancouver Island is absolutely the same scenario, where we've got mainly a single backcountry guiding outfit, IAG, great operation. They don't actually subscribe to the InfoX because they don't have too many people to share their info with. We only have one InfoX subscriber other than the Avalanche Canada field team on Vancouver Island, and it's Mount Washington. So we do get some info from an operation. And we, of course, get information from IAG guides when they're out in the field. And so, but they're not posting to InfoX. And so this definitely qualifies us as kind of a data sparse region. We don't have cat skiing. We don't have heli skiing or on any kind of regular basis. There are no highway programs to keep well, there are highway programs, but they don't have to deal with avalanches. I don't think generally. And there are some kind of mining operations, but really, or industrial operations. And so they're really focused on very specific pieces of terrain. So in these places, we need the field team to be the weather station, to grab that temperature reading, to take that snow, to dig that snow profile, and outline the structure for forecasters so they understand what's on the ground when they're thinking about what conditions are going to be like with forecast weather and those kinds of things. So that's kind of what the problem that we're dealing with, and some of the ways that we solve it in the forecast office, and as well kind of now with the public, with the Mountain Information Network. So the second kind of where I'll segue now is the focus on how we want to basically recruit you to help us solve this data sparse problem. So like I was saying, even having a field team in a data sparse region it's barely enough to support the forecast. That means, with a field team operating, we get roughly 4 days out of every week, we can get to one spot per day that can give the forecaster a kind of a point snapshot of conditions in that area. But like we were talking about, the region's really large, right? So we benefit from as much information as we can get in as many places as we can get it, because the forecast region, it got larger than it even was previously. It's a really large forecast region on the island. And so the idea behind the MIN is to have an open, localized sharing platform, so people can use it all over, anywhere they're recreating any forecast region. You don't need to be on Vancouver Island. You can be anywhere. Everybody's using the same app for current conditions. course, you can find it on avalanche.ca or on the Avalanche Canada app on your mobile. So on Android or iOS, works equally well. It's designed to be used both by the public and by professionals like us. So the kind of information that you're putting down there, it might seem like it's just kind of like simple info. It's the same kind of information that professionals are sharing on a platform like the InfoX. So it's actually not as different as some people might like to think it is, or maybe just think it is. Here's kind of what it looks like, right? I had a frame up there before, and this is one from earlier this season on Adder Peak, or near Adder Mountain anyway, Mount Adder on Sutton Pass. And this was just after everything had gone to crust for us. So the min works in a few different ways. So firstly, you can get info from the min. You can go on avalanche.ca on the app or on the website, scan around the map, look for the little blue icons, those kind of location points, click on those, and you get a report like this that somebody's filled out. They've checked a few boxes to tell folks what the conditions are generally. And ideally, they've written a little bit of a blurb about what they saw that day. And really, really key or extra ideal is if they've included a few photos so that the forecaster can kind of see what's going on in a visual sense. So that's kind of what it looks like. And then to submit to it, there on the app, there's an icon right on the map that says to create that asks you to create a report. It kind of looks like that blue reverse teardrop icon. The same thing is on the avalanche.ca website on the map down in the kind of bottom left corner, unless it's migrated recently. I don't think so, but it's really easy to find. It's right on the map, blue icon. This is where you're going to click to create your observation and share it with the community, or And so we almost certainly have more hands up for people that are viewing them in than contributing to it, like we saw here. And so that's okay, but we're hoping we can kind of even those numbers out and convince, some more people to do a bit more of that giving info part. And, there's good reason for this. It's more than just saying sharing is caring. Regional avalanche forecasts, it's important to understand that vast area that we're thinking about. Conditions can be really diverse within a region. Those lines that are that outline the regions, they were made really well. They're quite well designed. They tend to cover like usage areas and kind of snowpack conditions that are roughly similar throughout the forecast region, but with a region that large, you're absolutely going to get a diversity of conditions on a daily basis in each of them. So this means that avalanche danger could actually be higher than posted in some parts of a large region, or potentially lower than forecast in other parts of the region. So, but a daily, like an on-site observation, this is going to help you to refine that initial info and apply it to a slope specific or drainage specific scale, mountain specific scale, so that we can kind of like localize that info a lot more specifically. So that's I think an important part of the safety puzzle. Like if I was heading out into a region where this had happened, the day before or the morning of or something like that, and somebody had posted them in with cell service, I'd want to know that this had happened, if I was heading into anywhere near that kind of terrain, right? I've got a great question here from Rodney Newcomb, he's our Island Min MVP. So thanks, Rodney, for chiming in. He's asking, has Avalanche Canada considered adding a feature to allow for users to comment on mins? It would be a good way to make it more interactive. And there's definitely been some conversations about this. And so I think it's been considered, but it hasn't been implemented because there are pitfalls associated with it. And it's kind of like the pitfalls that we see on social media where people can be, less than kind, less than neighborly with their feedback on information. And I think there's something to be said for like having like a like button or something like that, where people could actually kind of interact in like a strictly positive way. But yeah, I think we're looking into it, and I think the conversation's open on that one. So it's a good question for sure, because it is a great idea to maximize, I think, the positive sides of social media, the things that we do benefit from, and try to get those into our platform without importing the kind of the stuff that we want to avoid, obviously. Yeah, so great question. Thanks, Rodney. Yeah, so a bit more about this. Another way that sharing is caring. AvCan field teams, we report to them in each day, like I was saying, while we're on shift. So we can't be everywhere at once. We want to know what you're seeing, where you're riding. And the forecasts require like a really steady stream of information. So if we're off for a few days between field team shifts and weather's changing during that time, like the schedule gets made not necessarily based on the weather, right? Because the weather is kind of day to day, and the schedule gets made, in the fall. So we might miss critical parts of the conditions puzzle as it's unfolding in the field and just not be able to get to it. So your input's really, really valuable there. So public and pros can help fill those data gaps for the forecaster in the office. We need those eyes, your eyes behind those goggles out there, right? So another idea here is like outsourcing potentially life-saving information. I kind of alluded to this when I was talking about that zone where I'd want to know that had happened if I was traveling into that area. So, if I'm seeing signs of instability like this, like shooting cracks, like this is really, really kind of active, unstable conditions, right? Or if I'm seeing, same kind of thing here, actual releases on the shooting crack or avalanches, this is really, really like this image just speaks volumes to the forecaster. It tells us so much about how things are going. Like we might be kind of waiting for a storm slab or a persistent slab to reach its tipping point. And if we get this information in a timely way, we can get it out to the public so that everybody knows that it's reached its tipping point. So we all benefit from this. And the imagery here is really, really powerful. There's something to be said for having an image and a story attached to a report that makes things kind of come alive a little bit more than they do in like an avalanche summary or a snowpack description in the forecast, where it's kind of text-based and you get your ratings and your avalanche problems. It's great information, but it's all quite kind of regimented and it doesn't have much of a story behind it. It doesn't maybe hit home the same way that something like this will. And so incidents is another really key one. So this is for us, I think this is something culture wide we really need to work on in kind of the avalanche patch or in our backcountry community, is to destigmatize and open up about near misses and accidents. So we really encourage this. And so on the quick report, you can actually click the incident report tab, and when something, if you get involved in an avalanche or you witness an involvement of an avalanche, or just basically those are your two examples, because there's a separate avalanche tab. So if you've just witnessed an avalanche that didn't have an involvement, both great to do. If you've got an incident, it's going to add a red dot to the blue kind of location marker when you place it on the map, so that we know like immediately just on looking at the map there's been an incident, because we can see that red dot. And that's something like when forecasters see that, or really when anybody sees that on the min when they're scanning through, that's going to grab your attention, and that's like really, really helpful information for the forecaster. So, am I not going forward? There we go. Yeah, so like Eleanor here says, we can learn from the mistakes of others, because we don't live long enough to make them all ourselves. So Avalanche Canada can lead by example here. We had a near miss a few years ago and published a min post about it that same night to make sure that people would learn from it and know what was going on with the current avalanche conditions. And that takes a bit of getting over your ego and your fears and this idea that you're an expert, and that maybe you thought you were infallible, or kind of there's certainly stigma around the idea of getting into an accident when this is the thing your whole career is based on avoiding. So yeah, pretty big deal. But in the end, we really believe that destigmatizing those close calls, getting them out the world in a timely fashion, the life-saving potential of that communication is definitely worth the pain of kind of going through that process of destigmatizing. Yeah, so there's actually the avalanche incident there. Yeah, so moving on, there's obviously some reasons that not everybody's been posting to the min, and that's totally reasonable. This might be a little bit like what you feel in your mind when you're looking at the map and wondering whether or not you should click that create report link. But yeah, it's not quite as dire as this seems. And even though there's some barriers, I think we can meet them head on and see if at least some of them can be partially overcome, or at least address them on kind of a case by case basis or on a kind of barrier by barrier basis and really understand what's holding us back. So there can be technical issues, and this is a reality. Like we're not Apple, we're not Google, and so when Avalanche Canada goes about creating an app that is going to work for thousands of people on a daily basis, there's bound to be some technical glitches, and there have been over the course of the MIN's kind of lifespan. So if you had an experience in the past where it didn't work for you and you abandoned ship, really do encourage you to give it another try, because I don't think it even takes a year between kind of update cycles on the MIN or on the Avalanche Canada app, so that we're like really like it's shaping up with each update cycle. It's really come around. I used to get all kinds of errors, but actually I don't even use my desktop computer to post MINs anymore because it's so smooth on mobile. And for me, it skips that last or that kind of middleman step of having to get your images off your phone onto your desktop and then put them into a report. The image, I'm taking images taking photos with my phone. The images are right there. They're much easier to grab, and it's just, you can do it outside of cell service, and it'll send once you return to cell service is actually pretty amazing. The only thing that I've found in terms of like an ongoing glitch that's still kind of happening is there's something about photo captions. So basically the captions on your photos can get mixed up at times. This is the only bug I've encountered in a long time with the MIN, and you can fix it if you're really, really, wanting to nail those photo captions and they're really funny like ours are. Go onto the website on your desktop, log in with your same login that you use for the Avalanche Canada app, and then you can edit the captions, put them in the right order. But yeah, that's the only thing I'll come across. And maybe actually one other thing, line breaks don't work well right now, but this stuff is known. These are like the least of the MIN's troubles over the last several years. So it's really shaping up. So don't give up on it. There's also a tutorial on the desktop or on the avalanche.ca website that kind of takes you through step by step how to make a post. So there's no real excuse in terms of like understanding how it works, because it's pretty straightforward, especially with that tutorial. But if there is any kind of uncertainty, or you're not sure, you're trying to make it work and it's not working, or if you're encountering a bug that I haven't just described to you, send us an email either to the forecaster inbox, so forecaster@avalanche.ca, ideally with your observation info if you weren't able to submit them in. That way the forecaster gets it in their inbox right away and can address it, the conditions info. Or you can contact the local field team, so you can just contact us. We'll have to maybe Nancy can throw my direct email address out there, and then we can, Bill's and Karina's, we can leave out of it. But if you have something that's affecting you here on the island, I think that's pretty reasonable. We should be able to help you out. Or Facebook messages, really, it doesn't really matter. Just contact us. Let us know if you're having troubles, and we'll help to make sure you're set up. Yeah, so this is another easy barrier to think of. When you think of like, what am I getting out of this thing? Really, it's for, when something like this is happening, and you're not aware of it, or people, or you witness something like this and other people aren't aware of it. There's a real, like, I don't want to be this person climbing this slope the day after this happened on the other side of the pass. Like I think there's a real benefit to getting people talking together so that we know collectively what's going on in our backcountry scene. So the backcountry, you may have heard the expression that it's a wicked learning environment. And that means that it doesn't always provide feedback, so negative or positive feedback. So you won't necessarily know when you've made a mistake. And so if you maybe, seeing a MIN post that shows something like this at the end of your day, where you only saw this, it might start to make you allow you to reflect a little bit more critically on, what you might have gotten away with, or thinking about the times that you were most at risk during the day and what you might have done differently if you would have had the information. I think it's helpful for that kind of continual self-assessment, kind of self-critique component that keeps us on our toes and riding safely in the backcountry every year. There's another really good reason to post to the MIN, and Rodney knows this. So you get free stuff. Yeah. So we got awesome swag that we give out, hats and buffs and goggle socks and really cool stuff. So there, you can rock one of these. And honestly, I've talked to Jen George, who honestly, or often is the one who's giving this swag out to folks after they post them in. And most people, they're so excited that the forecaster read them in and you've got value from them in. It's almost like the hat is secondary, but yeah, you should know that every min that we get, it's like we are reading it very, very thoroughly. We get so much value out of them when they cross our desks. So much appreciated, and keep them coming. And so this you might have told yourself in the past too, when you considered posting them in, that you're not an Avalanche expert. And I think there's something that kind of happened early on with the min, that when professional users or kind of semi-professional users or users with a kind of professional level education started posting to them in, there was a few people that started using kind of short form, the same kind of language that you'd use in a field book to keep it really short and tight for your field book. There's a certain kind of language, and it involves like compression test results and extended column test results, depending on what kind of snowpack tests you've done. And there's the kind of weird little acronyms and numbers and things like that can make them kind of confusing to read. That's the kind of stuff it actually, we don't really want to see that on the min, because not everybody gets it. And the forecaster doesn't need to see that to get what you're doing either. You can tell us that you did a compression test in plain English or an extended column test if you're at that professional level in plain English, and we'll know what you're talking about, and maybe the public will as well. And I think there's been an additional thing that was kind of like an unintended consequence of that language, was that it intimidated a lot of new users or would-be users of the min, thinking that, I don't know what those codes and symbols mean. So I guess I'm not welcome on this platform. And it's absolutely not the case. If we can get a photo, photos are key there. You can see in the image, photos are what it's all about. So if we get an image like this telling us it snowed this much over the day, my hat got buried, that's the info we need, right? And then, what you're seeing with wind, the transport of snow, sunshine, cloud, whether the snow got moist, whether it's firm, whether it's wind affected, or it's still light, dry powder. Just a description of that snow consistency and a photo that kind of shows how the snow is behaving, with your sled or your skis or your snowboard or whatever it might be. Yeah, that's what we need. That's the info. It doesn't need to be in the fancy code. That's not that important for us. Yeah. And I'm just seeing some comments in the Q&A. Great. Cool. Yeah. And so here's a great example. This might just look like a scenic kind of alpenglow kind of image to folks that they're posting, but I can see in this image as a forecaster, we've got active wind transport going on. So there's probably wind slabs forming in the alpine when I look at an image like that. It tells me snow is moving, right? So even though it might feel like it's just a scenic photo, there's usually more to it than meets the eye, or than sometimes meets the eye. Here's another one, avalanche activity. We can see in this one, the avalanche is old, it's got new snow on the debris. So there's snow in the tree, or there's no snow in the trees. So we can tell it's been warm in this region. Those kinds of clues are what forecasters are looking at. And you can look at too, to kind of get a sense of what conditions are out there. You can get fun with it too. Show us your sad crust photo. Like, we had lots of opportunities for sad crust photos on Vancouver Island this season. It's not over yet. Yeah, and here's another one, classic, not wanting to give away your secret stash. You do not need to give away your stash. And there's actually quite a few places on the island that I'm sure that people want to keep secret. And there's no need to make those public. If you want to put your location point down at your parking area, or just in the along the highway where you've turned off the highway, and tell us what mountain range you went to, something like that. That's going to be enough info for us. So you don't have to give away your stash, and that shouldn't be a concern. Yeah, so you can go riding to Zippermouth Creek. Don't have to geotag Zippermouth Creek. You can just pin somewhere that's like a reasonable nearby zone that kind of isn't like Campbell River downtown or Comox downtown or something like that. Somewhere like adjacent to the mountains, or just to tell us the mountain you went to, or the mountain range that you went to. Right. And so you might also wonder if forecasters are reading it. And I've already kind of gone over this. We're reading it every day. We absolutely value every min that comes through. It's a huge bonus when in a data sparse region like the island, or like a few of the regions around where we have field teams, and especially if the field team's not out, if we're getting mins during that time, it just means so much. Yeah, really, really helpful. Yeah, and there's other ways to get our attention too. I don't want to knock social media, because we, like forecasters in the 21st century, we just kind of have to accept that that's how a lot of people are communicating these days. And so we do go on social media and look for info. And so if you want to post to social, that's totally fine as well, because we get that that's where you're going, and that's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. If you want to get our attention on social, here are some of the ways that you can do it. So you can reach AvCan generally. You can reach us directly with those tags. You can reach the community, like people that are recreating potentially at our kind of local mountains, letting Island Alpine guides or some of the local clubs know about this, the kind of activity or the conditions that you're seeing out there. Super welcome. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. And then that's maybe a little bit more if folks are looking for that social platform, kind of like what Rodney was talking about with the idea of kind of interacting with people's posts. We can still do that. Just do that on social media. Another thing you can do quite easily is to create a min and then share the min to social. It's just a single button. When you complete your min, you click on the Facebook or the Instagram icon, I think it's just Facebook and Twitter. You can post it directly to social so that folks can see it in that platform as well. And so you can do some promotion too if you want to kind of hashtag us, or just hashtag Avalanche Safety generally, kind of get some general attention from people. But yeah, the real kind of, if you want to reach us, that's how you reach us directly on social. Yeah, this is just kind of about that idea that, we can bring info to people where people are already spending time. And we do this as well. We post our mins to Facebook. We interact on Facebook, but we don't really, when the field team's interacting on Facebook, we're not really putting always like the real meat and potatoes, nitty gritty, nuts and bolts of our observations in social media, because it's not quite the right platform for it. It's a bit kind of looser, more social, for fun. So usually we'll post kind of more stories about our day, that kind of overall conditions that we found, and like our strategy for the day, how we manage things. So it's kind of a different communication tool. But yeah, we absolutely interact with social as well. And, this, it's kind of refreshing if people have multiple ways of looking for info. I think it's a good thing. And we have no vendetta against social media at all. Yeah. And if that's how people connect to this information, that's how we want to reach them. Absolutely. So the kind of the big picture here is to, understand that there's more to Avalanche Canada than just the forecast. Not just the forecast. It is kind of like the flagship product, but we've got the mountain weather forecast. That's an absolutely stellar product. 365 days a year. MSC, the Environment Canada, puts that product together for us. The min has just been an awesome platform for people to interact with. And you can see this image from the island here, showing a pretty good spread of min posts across the island over the season. Not all of those are the field teams. So we do really appreciate the folks that have been getting out into these zones and telling us what's going on as well, because we're not out there every day. There might be a day where we're at Kane and we can't get to the south of the island. And then there might be a day where we're at Adder Peak and we have no idea what's going on in the Prince of Wales Range or what have you. So yeah, get your obs out there, join the conversation, and you'll probably win some stuff. Just ask Rodney. So with that, we can open it up to questions. Any questions about the min or any of the stuff that I've talked about so far? Feel free to raise your hand if you want to chat direct.
Colin, we did have one I just kind of answered, but one person's asking, are all areas important? Do you think they would just, some places get too much information?
Somebody is maybe thinking about like Mount Allen Brooks or Elma, like around.
Yeah, Forbidden Plateau was the example.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely valuable for us, because the island, like this, I don't want to paint it with too broad of a brush, but there's a lot of places that are quite similar to each other on the island. And when we get into the below tree line elevation, things can be pretty uniform across large parts of the island. So absolutely, your obs from Forbidden Plateau, Mount Beecher, Alan Brooks and Alma, absolutely valuable. And you might have actually noticed that the field team hasn't been spending a lot of time going into that zone. And it's because you guys have done such a good job of covering it for us. You've been telling us about the conditions there. So that leaves us open to explore some of these other zones that can help people in other areas as well. And the forecasters up to speed on those areas that get hit regularly. And it helps to kind of inform the forecasters too about what's the usage pattern. Where do people really go in the region? That's a really important piece of information too. So yeah, keep them coming, even if they like are overlapping and you don't know which one's yours and there's like a big pile of them. Keep them coming.
Excellent. It looks like we have a hand up here by Joel.
Oh, nice.
Rico.
Oh, hey, Joel.
Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Colin.
How's it going?
Good. I had a question about the weather stations on the app. There's only one in Vancouver Island. Is there plans to add more? Because I find those are really useful when it's kind of like all in one spot instead of having to dig around. Yeah,
there's a bit of a project going on. We need to basically coordinate with Floyd. I want to say Floyer because we've got a Floyer in our office, but Bill Floyd, he operates the Vancouver Island University Coastal Hydrology Research Lab weather stations. And basically it's just a matter of getting that data onto the website. We've done this with lots of different kind of weather station sources all over the province. And so they're all the weather stations you see on the website, they're not all Avalanche Canada stations. We only have a few of them. A lot of those are the highways programs stations, and there's a whole kind of range of other ones. And so I'm not sure where the conversation's at right now with VIU, but my fingers are crossed, and I know that there's something kind of going on in the background about hopefully getting that happening. In the meantime, I'm going to share a resource. Actually, Nancy might put it in there. I'll be talking about it later as well. To Bill Floyd's stations. So in the meantime, you can still access them, and Mount Cain links to them as well because there's a couple stations up on Cain. And so that information is publicly available. It's not behind like a paywall or anything like that. We'll be able to get to it.
Yeah, I actually just found out about those stations like the other day. So
I
just started looking at them.
Yeah, they're great. Absolutely.
Cool. Thanks.
I think absolutely. All weather stations, I think, take a little kind of getting used to what they're good at and what they're bad or not so good at. And some stations are better with wind, and some stations are better with snow, and elevation is a big factor, and where it is in the region is a big factor. So it takes a bit, and like learning the platform as well, because it'll look different on Bill's website or the VIU CHRL website than it will on the graphs and things like that take a little bit of getting used to, but you train your eye and you work on them and you start to develop familiarity with them.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Joel.
Awesome. Just so you know, Colin, Nancy has posted those in the chat box already.
So. Oh, excellent. Okay, great. Still useful to submit them in after the day's avalanche forecast has come out. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, do it for sure. This is like a key part of the forecast. Part of their workflow in the morning is what we call validation. Did what I said was going to happen? Did my forecast pan out? And your min is going to help the forecaster answer that question and know where they're starting from on the following day. Because forecasting, it's a really tricky art science, where you want to put it, because you're creating tomorrow's forecast. Well, you're always creating tomorrow's forecast with yesterday's information, and you don't know what's going on today other than what you predicted would happen today. And you publish in that state of not knowing really what happened today, and you might get a little bit of an idea of what happened, or you will know what happened yesterday, but you won't know really what happened today until probably after you published your forecast. So yeah, those are definitely valuable. Help us with the validation piece for the next day. Yeah. Great platform to share information. Can it be possible to share avalanche information through Zoom? Snowpack data, what to look for when people are touring. Classes. I think this sounds like a task for like the guiding and instruction community to come. I mean, I don't want to take it off of Avalanche Canada's shoulders at all, because we do. One thing I should kind of mention, we do have lots of really good resources like this on the avalanche.ca website. Click on the Learn tab, go through some of the tutorials, check out AvSavvy. It's a new one that was created for this season. That's like a really great kind of take you through all the steps of kind of avalanche awareness. And then in terms of like more like live, other than like what we're doing here tonight, there might be a place for like local guiding operations or something like that to kind of reach out to people in a way to kind of like offer instruction. Because this sounds like a course to me. It sounds a little bit like the online component of what an AST might be. Those are some of my ideas anyway, but definitely check out the Learn tab, AvSavvy, and the kind of throughout the online tutorial stuff on the website, and then reach out to a local guiding agency like IAG or anybody else who's, you could look into the Sea to Sky as well. If you're, or the North Shore, there's lots of other operators on the mainland. I don't want to kind of single one company out. But yeah, I'm sure that there's an appetite to deliver the training that you're looking for. Yes, like of course, everything is booked up for AST1, and it's tough to learn from people who know what they are talking about. Yeah, I mean, I feel you on this. I think for me, it's like I think the task is going to have to be to find yourself an AST1. If you haven't taken an AST1 yet, I think it's a matter of booking early for next season. And then, there's also opportunities like we have coming up this weekend at Mount Cain, where we're going to have Avalanche professionals, boots on the ground, come and talk to us. We can answer all kinds of Avalanche type questions and just kind of interact. And then you could always just email the field team too, if you have some specific questions about kind of current conditions, or if you're having trouble interpreting the forecast, something like that, you can get in touch with us. Yeah, thank you. Cool. Anything else, Brent? Might be okay, hey?
I think you kind of got it all covered. We just had Barry Hansen in the chat box there. He was just mentioning that he's a bird watcher, and they use an established platform, ebird.org.
Yeah, right.
Lab. It's kind of the same idea of sharing global information, and it's super popular. And he was just pointing that out.
Right. There might be some lessons from something like that for us.
Collaborate with and see.
Or even just learn from. Yeah. Cool idea.
Other than that, I think you've covered all the questions so far there, Colin. So if you want
cool. Well, I want to go into I'll jump into my next segment here. So finish up on the min, but for sure keep the questions coming on min stuff if more come to you in the next few minutes while we're chatting about this kind of local stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about the island snowpack and kind of how it's shaping up. This is an image of a snowpack model. So it's a very kind of technical image, but I'm going to try to describe what you're seeing on the screen here. So you can see there's a time series along the bottom. And Brent, does my mouse show up when I'm scanning on the screen there? I just want to confirm.
Yes, it does.
Okay, perfect. Great. So you can see we've got a time series here, and then we've got the height of the snowpack vertically. And then these colors describe different types of grains. So this yellow stuff is precipitation particles. That's the good stuff. That's powder. This purple, when you see it, is a likely candidate for persistent weak layer, the stuff that we don't want to see in the snowpack. And then when we see this kind of purple stuff, it's like a settling snowpack. It's no longer like new snow, it's like settled snow. And then this green color here is a robust crust. And this stuff, all this stuff is melt forms, snow that has melted at least once. Okay, so when we look at that final piece of the time series here at Mount Cain, this is only at 831 meters, so it's quite low elevation. But this is what the snowpack pretty much looks like at present in that part of the world. So it's totally uniform. It's basically uniform melt forms basically right now. So we're kind of into at low elevations and lower snowpack areas, pretty much melt out of the snowpack right now. And that's going to continue through this weekend. So we can see how this complex kind of winter snowpack, once we get like rain events happening, it very quickly transitions into a very different kind of snowpack where it doesn't have those those winter features anymore, and the likelihood of persistent weak layers to live through that kind of cycle is really, really low. So you can see this purple line disappeared pretty quickly, and so did the rounded grains too, and you don't even see any facets in this snowpack model. So there's one example of at least what a snowpack model thinks is going on in the snowpack right now. And they do pretty good. They work on weather models, and as long as the weather model pans out reasonably well, the snowpack model is pretty good at keeping it up to date on the snowpack. But of course, it's always better for us to go out and validate and dig a hole and examine the snowpack ourselves. The field team hasn't been out in a few days, so I didn't want to give an old snowpack description. And basically, the snowpack models right now are the most current snowpack information I've got. So you can see here, Mount Alexandra, a bit of a different zone, so a little bit higher up in the mountains. And some of the structure was preserved quite a bit longer than you saw at lower elevations there. So you can see this new snow, you can see some rounded grains in here, bit of complexity. But now, after days of rain and days of melt freeze, very much just quite uniform. There's a little bit of different consistency of like hardness of melt forms, but pretty much we're looking at melt forms, whether they're moist or wet is kind of uncertain, but almost certain, like most places right now have either a moist or wet snowpack. I'm not sure there's anything left for dry snow out there in the snowpack, very little. Here down at 50 centimeters, so this is a 100 centimeter total snowpack. This big thing here is the December 30th crust. So this crust we saw in the mountains anywhere from 10 centimeters to 70 centimeters thick. And a kind of average, maybe about 40 to 50 centimeters thick. That's a real bomber crust. And there's always a concern when you have a crust like this of things, you know, what's the layer that's set up on top of here. But with these melt forms, they've all undergone like a really significant kind of bonding process. And really, I'll talk about the kind of conditions to watch out for with this, but I'll just start with structure for now. That's kind of what we've got going for structure. Somebody's asking where we can access the snowpack models. I've got a link that's coming up shortly. Yeah. So both those questions I will be able to answer shortly. So moving right along to Golden Hind. It's a bigger mountain, a little bit further in the interior, roughly the same elevation, a little bit lower. And you can see that the snowpack's higher here. So we've got a better kind of more representative of a deeper snowpack area. There's the hint, the signal, the potential that there is some kind of weakness above that Jan 20th through. It's kind of that crust it got buried maybe on the 20th, but it really stayed on the surface until about the 30th. There may be something in some parts of the region under this moist snow, but it's not going to take very long for this moist snow to really just crush and absorb that weak layer. There's not, this snowpack's going to very quick, if indeed it does look like that up there, it's very quickly going to trend closer to something like what we saw on Alexandra, that previous image. So that's kind of the current picture. We've kind of lost our winter cold snowpack, and we've transitioned very early into kind of closer to a spring snowpack. But the season's not over, and there's always potential for more snow to fall in the future, and we can get back to cold, dry snow. All it takes is a storm to do that. So that's kind of the current snapshot. Yeah, and I'll move on another step here. So just this is the problem, or the thing to be looking out for with current conditions, is the idea of isothermal snow. So this definition is taken from the AvCan glossary on the website. It's snow that's at the same temperature throughout. But really, when we're talking about isothermal snow, we're talking about snow that's melting. So it's reached 0 degrees throughout its depth. You've got free water draining through the snowpack. So as the snowpack reaches its melting point, all the bonds between the snow grains, they transform from ice into water, and that results in a loss of cohesion throughout the snowpack. And when that free water is still in the snow, very active wet, loose avalanche conditions typically result from that scenario. And so we get that when it's actively raining, or when it's really sunny on a south-facing slope and you get melt happening. That water starts to saturate the upper snowpack and it loses cohesion, and it can produce wet, loose avalanches. So that's basically the concern that we're managing out there right now. And so these, as deeper layers, it says here, as deeper layers of the snowpack begin to melt, larger avalanches become possible. So if the entire snowpack becomes isothermal, the snowpack can slide like as not in a slab form, or probably not in a slab form, but as a large, loose, wet avalanche. Something happens though with isothermal snow is that overnight we get something called recovery. So you can see kind of in the background of this image an old wet loose avalanche that had run down. This is actually up the Cruikshank River, kind of not too far from places like Mount Elma and Allen Brooks, just kind of behind. And so overnight refreeze, you can see this sled sitting on the surface there. It's not even close to the same kind of conditions that snow was in when it slid down the mountainside. So overnight refreeze refers to the snowpack returning to a frozen state after a period of daytime warming or rain. Refreezing can occur as a result of below air temperatures, and really important here, can also result from radiative cooling of the snowpack or from both. So with warm overnight temperatures like what we're going to be experiencing over the next few days here, we've got freezing levels up to 3,000 plus meters for the next few days. That seems to tell us that the snowpack should be actively melting the entire time because it's above zero where the snow is. So the snowpack should just be melting continuously. That isn't always the case because where long wave radiation can emit from the snowpack and not kind of bounce off of clouds or from tree canopy back down onto the snowpack, if it can just continuously emit, that cools the snowpack. And so that can happen even when we've got above zero temperatures. We can have the snow refreeze strictly from radiative cooling to produce a crust on the surface. Of course, or I shouldn't say of course, but the idea here is that the refrozen snowpack is much more stable than a snowpack that is moist or wet. It doesn't have the potential to run as a wet loose avalanche because it's a frozen chunk of concrete like we've experienced here on the island recently. So good overnight recovery of the snowpack ensures relatively safe conditions while, in the early morning, while that snow is in that frozen state until the heat of the day begins to melt the snowpack once again. And then it can go into a refreeze overnight when we get radiative cooling, et cetera. So this is a kind of a melt freeze cycle. So the snowpack can enter and exit this isothermal state pretty continuously in a repeated way. So it's really managing avalanche danger can become much more of just like a daily pattern of monitoring how the snow surface is changing, watching for isothermal conditions, and understanding that isothermal conditions are likely to develop in the afternoon, kind of during periods like the most intense daytime warming, and managing that with your travel. So avoiding traveling on steep south-facing slopes during the heat of the day because they're going to become isothermal and they're going to be able to produce wet loose avalanches. There's something a little bit kind of complex about the situation too, is that as isothermal snow settles, free water drains from the upper snowpack. And so as free water drains, even if it stays at that kind of 0 degree state, without the free water that kind of lubricates the bonds or has the bonds broken down between grains, the snow is a lot less likely to slide as a wet loose. So it really, the kind of isothermal snow that it takes to produce a wet loose, it's quite wet. So you're picking up the snow and you're squeezing it, and you're either getting water through your glove or you're getting water out of the bottom of the snow that you're squeezing. And that, that can change on a daily basis. It can become isothermal again, water can drain, can refreeze, go into melt state, free water shows up in the snowpack again, it can drain out, etc. So this is kind of like a continuous process that kind of goes on and on. So that's kind of the situation we're in right now. So we're just managing basically spring conditions. There's a case for us switching the island forecast region over to spring conditions while conditions are like this, because there's such a dramatic daily shift with daily temperature trends that it's tough to pick a single danger rating that covers the entire day because things change so dramatically. It's worth noting that an isothermal snowpack in areas where we've got persistent weak layers in the snowpack that are really problematic, where they haven't created really strong bonds, with neighboring grains, it's much more likely to produce like large, like wet slabs and things like that. It doesn't seem like that we've got that kind of condition on the island right now. It kind of seems like most of our crusts have kind of broken down and kind of crumbled and kind of been subjected to this melting process. And so kind of lost their definition. There's not a really clean bed surface in the snowpack like there used to be. So it seems like that's not the issue on the island. We're more just dealing with a kind of a spring daily cooling and warming pattern. So in context, just to give you an idea of what we're looking at for the seasonal snowpack, we're the blue line on this chart. So 21 to 22 is that blue line, and you can see the snow water equivalent is on the left in the vertical axis, and then the months of the year on the horizontal axis. Now the green line is last season. So you can see we're a few mils short of last season, nothing too dramatic there. And then we're considerably below the historical daily median, so the average that we would get in an average season. So we're below average with our snowpack, or the water content of our snowpack right now. And then you can see the kind of darker pink that encompasses all three of those lines. That's the historical 25th to 75th percentile. So between 25% and 75% of the time, the snowpack is within that range. We, as you can see, are very close to being at the edge or below. We're getting very close to below the 25th percentile of the average snowpack. So it's not a great season for snow, but you can see as well, there's quite a bit of growth. There's quite a bit of snow water equivalent that's still to come in a typical season here. Like the snowpack is still in a growth phase in most years, not every year, because you can see that the minimum and maximum are way, way, way different. That's that kind of the outside kind of gray lines there. So we're outside of the kind of really extreme snowpack conditions. We're at the lower end of average, kind of very lower end of average, but there's a bit of hope for the future with, in typical years, we're still going to be gaining snowpack. So fingers crossed, it's not over yet. So a bit of a look ahead at the weather. You can see this is just for tomorrow's weather, but it's going to be very similar for the following couple of days. Basically, a big ridge is building over the most of the province, and the south coast is going to see, and the island itself is going to see some of the warmest temperatures of the entire province. So freezing levels, like I was saying, exceeding 3,000 meters, potentially some inversion conditions. So you might experience cooler conditions a little bit lower than you will higher up in the mountains. So that's pretty significant, right? When we think of warming at the highest elevations is going to be more significant than warming when you're like ascending the mountains. It might feel like things are quite locked up and crusty as you're walking, but as you ascend to elevation, things could be actively melting, or they'll get there much quicker than things will at lower elevations. So that's kind of a counterintuitive piece to keep in mind, the idea of an inversion. And you can kind of see it in this image here, where we've got the freezing level according to meters here. So you can see it reaching up into 3,000 meters or so. Virtually no relative humidity in the atmosphere here, so totally dry. And then you've got a bit of a bubble here of 5 degrees. And so below, like there's little places where you could get almost under that warm air and be into a little bit cooler air, like maybe below 1,000 meters. It'll feel a little bit cooler than it will at 1,500 or 2,000 meters in the next couple of days. Not much in the way of wind coming up during this time, so it should get quite warm with that full sun. And then probably the most important thing that we're looking at in this chart, way at the bottom, we can see precipitation in millimeters. And the 14th, there's potential for some precipitation there at the end of this thing, and maybe that's happening when the freezing level drops. So maybe we get a little bit of dust out of that. And then looking way ahead, and forecasts or weather models are not great at accuracy, looking as far ahead as they do. Like the global model here looks out 10 days. It's not really performing really well at days 9 and 10. But on those 2 days, we do see a little bit of a signal of some possible precip with freezing levels that are around 1,000 meters. So that should bring us snow into the mountains if that pans out. So fingers crossed there. And you can see this one, all these red dots on the map here, those make up the members, all the different lines are all the different members of that group. And then we can see the same thing on a really awesome product here. This is Spot Weather, publicly available, spot.wx. I'll post that, or we'll be posting that link. Not that it's easy enough to remember. Basically telling us the exact same thing. So we've got a few millimeters that show up toward the end of the period here. Same weather model that we're looking at here. And yeah, not much in the way of precip heading our way. So if we try to look way, way ahead, this is a product that's available or available on the mountain weather forecast. It's the long range view. If you look all the way past day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, 5, etc., you get to the long range. And this gives us a bit of an idea of whether there could be precipitation in the future. And then so right around the kind of maybe the 19th to the 24th, we can kind of see up to, 2 to 3 millimeter per hour precipitation rates showing up around that time, and temperatures that are at sea level around +5, +4. So there's potential that that's snow. There's reasonable potential that that's going to be snow in the mountains. So the freezing level is going to be key there, though, because it most likely will precipitate at some point. But whether it's warm enough or cold enough to fall as snow, that's the crux for us. So fingers crossed there. So you might be thinking of traveling to kind of get away from some of the conditions that we've been dealt here on the island. Just really important to keep in mind that if you're looking at traveling into the places like the Sea to Sky or South Coast Inland to go into do some backcountry touring or some snowmobiling or anything really in avalanche terrain, it's a very different picture of what's going on in the interior. Particularly, it's basically a colder winter snowpack. It's like the same kind of snowpack images that I was showing you on those weather models that had lots of colors on them, showing you there's lots of different kind of layering in the snowpack. That very much exists in the South Coast Inland and Sea to Sky. And check out those forecasts if you're thinking of heading out to those areas, because there's some really important reports of avalanches and things. And there was an avalanche fatality in the Sea to Sky recently. And so that should hopefully be enough weight behind the information that we're trying to put out there to get folks thinking really carefully about where they decide to be in the coming days. And that SPA is going to be in effect until Sunday. So our SPA is a special public avalanche warning. I probably should have started with that. But yeah, that's the idea. If you're traveling inland, then check the forecast, read the SPA. Now, as promised, here are some of those resources I mentioned. So RFE, it's kind of, you can see it in the background here. It's a really cool a resource for checking out weather stations and webcams and all kinds of different pieces of information all over the province. So you can click on all these different things. The snowpack models show up in here. Snow pillows, like we've got one snow pillow at Wolf River. That's probably the one that shows up on the AvCan website. You can get it on RFE as well. It has the VIU Coastal Hydrology Research Lab links on there as well. And of course, they're right here too. So Nancy's going to put that link through to you. Spot weather, like I was talking about. And then I got that snowpack kind of averages and statistics chart from the BC Snow Survey Station's interactive map. So that resource is available to you. And I don't even try to read out that URL. It's too long. Okay, so I'll move right on. We're kind of over an hour here, so I'm going to try to go quickly. Just a quick update on the VI team, Vancouver Island team. We got Bill Phipps there, former Vancouver Island Avalanche Center Society or Avalanche Center Society forecaster. So we're really lucky to have Bill around. He's got a huge wealth of information of many, many years of recreating the island in lots of different places. So he's really shown us a lot about what the island's all about. It's been really great to have him on the team. We have Karina Backer, really, really stellar member of the team as well. She's a ski patroller at Mount Washington, recent level 2 graduate, and super amazing athlete when it comes to cross country skiing by athlete, really amazing, huge, unreal first aid resume, really qualified in that regard. And then we've got me. I've kind of bring the Avalanche Canada history to the island team. So I really kind of understand how the forecast office works, how the field teams work in different parts of the province. And so kind of bringing that together with these Vancouver Island experts to make a really solid foundation for our team. That's us. And here's kind of by the numbers. We've traveled a lot. And this is just our truck miles, not like our sled miles might kind of approach those numbers by now. We've put out a lot of min posts. So hopefully folks have been checking those out. We've been managing some social media accounts. Nancy's going to post our Instagram and our Facebook handles, so you can follow us there, or our tags. And then we've had about 29 days in the field. We've got a lot more to come. We've kind of sussed out about 15 zones for us to do day trips in. So we're kind of restricted. Like if you look at like Philip Stone's Island Alpine, I think there's like maybe 10% of the tours in that book can be done in a day. Most of them are like 2-3 days plus. So we don't have that luxury as a field team. So we really have to suss out these really quick forays that get us up to elevation where we get good observations nice and quickly. And we've figured out a good number of those so far on the island. And there's lots more to figure out too. So we're looking forward to exploring more. We've already done 6 outreach events, including tonight's. We almost had 7, but we lost Mount Washington's Avalanche Awareness Days at the last minute. So I'm sure that they're going to come back either this season or next season twice as good. We're going to have an awesome event there. And we cleared many down trees this season because of the low elevation snow that we got and the subsequent rain. It's made access a real challenge in a lot of places. So yeah, some of those challenges, of course, snowpack and weather can be challenging. You can kind of see in the background of this image, the kind of glare on the crust that Bill's standing on there. So that really dictated a lot about where we could travel and how we could travel over the last little while. Like sledding on a crust like that or skiing on a crust like that definitely presents some hazards. Although, when that crust softens up, it's actually amazing for travel. But we were just, a lot of the time, it wasn't softening up for us. So challenged in that way, but keeping it safe, and we haven't had any significant injuries, so that's good. The access has been challenging with lots of down trees, and staging and parking on the island is always a little bit of a question mark, and it takes some sussing out. We had to dig out a parking spot at Elk Mountain, so if anybody is going to Elk Mountain and needs a parking spot to unload a sled at the bottom of the road, I think the parking spot's still dug out there, and it's quite available. And then folks have also been challenged, that we understand, in the community with gate closures this season because of that low elevation snow. Mosaic has kept a lot of the gates closed. So we factor this into where we go. We think about where people can go, and we want to make sure that our information is relevant. And there are some groups like the snowmobile clubs that have gates to different keys to different gates. And we know that usually you'd have access to places like the Cameron Main or the Buckley Bay Main on weekends, but we haven't for some time. So we're trying to manage that and, go to those places when we know that people are going to be able to get into there shortly after, so we can give kind of an up-to-date conditions picture. But we understand, it's a challenge right now for lots of folks. And so if that's kind of pushing you out into some new and unexplored zones as well, be really keen to hear about other zones that you think that we should be checking out, so that we're reflecting them well in the forecast as well. Because you can see, everybody has seen where we've been traveling. You can see our mins, of course, right? So if there's places other than where you see those mins that you think Avalanche Canada should be kind of have on lockdown, or you see lots of people recreating there, or interesting snowpack conditions especially, let us know and we'll check it out. Limited face-to-face outreach, like again tonight, we're going to have a bit more face to masked face on Kane this weekend. So that's exciting. Kind of a step back into that face-to-face stuff. In general, all the challenges have been quite manageable. And so for folks who want to get involved with us, it's, maybe it's just me that's hoping that you want to do that, but I think folks do want to get, when I see the min posters and people signing up for an event like this and signing up for Backcountry Fest, there is an appetite, I think, out there. So start with the min, right? That's a really helpful one for us. Get in on the social media side of things. I've actually observed here on Vancouver Island, aside from like ranting about gate closures, the community here is actually really supportive. I've seen lots of really great positivity and information sharing, and not a lot of like flaming of other people, which is like pretty awesome. Like that's not every social media culture around our forecast region. So kind of hold on to that gem as tightly as you can. Cause yeah, it's we as the members of our backcountry community are the ones who are shaping that culture. And, if we have if we're caving to urges to call out behavior in a toxic way, or that energy is going to take hold of our culture. Cause of course the algorithm loves the drama, right? So don't feed the algorithm, feed us information, feed your community information instead. So, but I don't need to tell you guys this, the social media scene is pretty awesome here. So keep it up. And on a final note, if you see us out there in the hills, if you see the truck, the sleds, our logo jackets, if you see us up to our necks in a profile, come say hi. We'll talk to you about the snowpack, talk avalanches, answer questions, whatever you'd like. Don't be shy at all. We're super looking forward to meeting all of you at some point. So there's going to be a really great opportunity for it starting tomorrow. We're heading up to Kane. We're going to do a bit of a walk out into the backcountry, get a bit of a snowpack, kind of snapshot of the snowpack, and have lots of activities and discussions ready for Saturday. Lots of cool stuff, lots of prizes to win. And there's other great events by folks like IAG and Mount Kane itself. And there's a really cool, the Fem Plus backcountry workshop, and then a ski demo day Ski Tack Hut is putting on as well. So definitely some worthwhile stuff. So hopefully we'll see you there. Now, another chance for questions about any of that stuff that I chatted about.
Oh,
quiet so far.
Just, kudos coming in on the chat box there, Colin.
Nice. I should take a look at that.
That's amazing. You guys are, we're so happy to have a presence out on the island for Avalanche Canada.
Sweet.
And I think, such a good instructive session on the Mountain Information Network. The MIN's proven to be a great source of information for our forecasters. And it's not a hard task, as you describe. I think a lot of people are scared by the acronyms and the language and the terminology, but hey, all you got to do is say it was blower out there, and
totally
caster picks that up. And it actually was snowing rather than raining out there. So
yeah, and that's such a key one for the island. Like, did it snow? Did it rain? How high?
And did it rain?
Half
here?
of our
Did
min
it snow
posts have
this
been like
high?
a list of elevations and conditions at different elevations, just to let people know like what actually happened out there. The other day, I was forecasting for the island, and we had 3,000 meter or 2,500 meter freezing level with precip, and it was snowing at like 1,000 meters. Like, what's going on? This is not supposed to be happening. So yeah, challenges, and that's the kind of stuff that the forecaster can really benefit from. So seeing that can help us to update things.
Absolutely. And everyone with the min, it's getting in that habit of doing it, just having it part of your daily.
Totally. Yeah. Part of the daily process. Exactly.
I know a lot of people, the person that's riding shotgun on the way home, they're in charge of the min.
Yeah.
I see that a lot. And they challenge each other, get you and your group to challenge each other. Who's going to get the best min? Because like you say, you can win some swag, who's going to get the free hat this week?
Yeah, totally. Who's got the best min title? That's the real challenge.
Yeah.
Are you going to rhyme it, or are you going to alliterate it? Is it going to be a sonnet?
No, that's awesome. Fantastic presentation there, Colin.
Thanks, Brent.
Connor, he was asking if there's any suspicion of an increase in gate openings on the weekends.
I think what it's going to take is for the roads to clear. I think Mosaic's concerned about public safety with the roads, because if folks are walking on they might not realize that how folks want to access, but if folks want to drive on those roads, they're really nasty right now. I don't think we've driven much past like 100 meters past a gate in the last month, because it's just been, we want to park as soon as possible when we cross the gate, or we've just parked on the other side of the gate and taken our sleds through because the roads are almost impassable, just super slick and hazardous. So I think they're concerned with that. And so it's going to take a real melt out to make that happen. That's my suspicion. I don't have the straight goods from Mosaic, but that's what I suspect is going on there. But something that folks might want to consider, if you don't necessarily need to be a snowmobiler, but maybe it's something to consider in terms of like access, like getting a snowmobile club membership does get you gate keys to some of the gates that people want to get through. So you can talk to the Mid-Island Snowblazers or the North Island Snowmobile Association about that. and, maybe chip in on a sled together and access some new mountain zones, because there's lots of really cool skiing and things that I've seen, and snowshoeing, or really whatever kind of adventure you can think of in these zones that folks could access, if they have the interest in doing it. Snowline elevation wise, southwest of Was. I think we're pretty much, I think, below threshold for avalanches, below about 1,000 meters. Pretty much most places on the island right now. Yeah, below 1,000 meters, there's almost not enough snow for avalanches. Yeah, but I'm not sure exactly what the snow line specifically is. Because the thing is, we got little bits of snow almost to valley bottom in lots of places still, so it's a bit tough to say where snow line is. But yeah, in terms of where skiing and potential avalanche activity is, it's kind of like, I'd say maybe 900 meters and up right now. Cool. We can maybe leave it at that. But if anybody has more stuff, they can always reach out to the field team, reach out to Avalanche Canada, and really appreciate you guys all coming out tonight. See you at Mount Cain.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you very much, Colin. That was super informative. And hey, folks, they're out there on the island. You reach out to them. They're super keen to talk to you and give you some information. And get those mins in. Let's have too many. We won't even know what to do with.
That sounds great.
People ask us about, and it would be a fantastic problem to have.
Yeah, bring it.
Yeah, exactly. Hey.
Yeah. Awesome. I miss avalanche problems too. We can have an avalanche problem one of these days too, sometime.
There you go. Yeah. Well, be careful what you wish for, right?
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you, Colin. All right. And awesome, folks. Don't forget about the Backcountry Fest that the field team is going to be at this weekend. Get out there. They're going to have some transceiver practices and rescue scenarios and some tutorials. And hey, they might even teach you how to put in a min post there if you're having troubles with those still. Now we're going to move on to some draw prizes. Nancy's going to pick some names. She's going to read out some names, and you can send your contact information for shipping to producer@avalanche.ca, which Nancy's going to put in the chat box there as well. So let's hear who the big winners are tonight, Nancy.
Hey, everybody. I pulled 3 names. We have 3 buffs from BCA, and they are going to Brandon Wilms, Erica Roy, and Stacy Doyle. And we have a grand prize of a BCA snow study kit, and the winner of that is Mike Ellis. So if you winners can send us an email at producer@avalanche.ca and with your shipping address, and then we'll get those off to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Congratulations to all the winners there tonight. Folks, thank you so much for taking the time out in your evening to join us on the webinar. As Nancy mentioned in the chat box there, you can go to our website. All our previous webinars are recorded. They're available online on the avalanche.ca website. There's a link in the chat box Nancy posted a while ago. We super appreciate your interest in avalanche safety. Thank you for joining us. We're always open for donations. We are a nonprofit organization, and things are going well, but we could always use a little bit of help. Next week, the next webinar, Thursday, February 17th, avalanche forecasting in Newfoundland. We reached out, we started a new field team out there last year, and this year we're going to be having our first forecast for the Newfoundland region. It's quite astonishing. They're going to start on February 18th, but yeah, if you want to see what's happening over in Newfoundland with the field team and what's happening with the forecasting program over there, sign on up. Pre-registration is required. We super appreciate all you folks coming out, spending the evening with us. Thank you so much, and we hope the rest of your winter goes well, and we hope you guys get a little more cooler temps and some fresh snow out there on the island. Thank you very much, everyone.